right, so here we have Insidious from Impact Soundworks, and this is loaded. This synth is loaded with presets, over 300 presets. As you can see, we have 3 different oscillators down here. Turn those on and off real easily, real quickly. We have a global filter over here. Of course, as you can see, this runs in REAKTOR, either the full version of REAKTOR like we have here, or the free REAKTOR player. Now, it's called Insidious because SID, it's based on the SID chip from the Commodore 64. So for anyone looking for authentic Commodore 64 sounds, vintage video game sounds, if you're into chiptune, even EDM, future bass, you can really even use this if you weave it throughout metal, if you weave it throughout some like hybrid cinematic stuff. And if you head over to the Impact Soundworks website, of course, this will be linked down below. There's going to be a bunch of samples, full musical samples, different styles of music that Insidious is used in. As I said, you can use Insidious, these sort of vintage sounds, these SID sounds, Commodore 64 sounds, vintage video game sounds, however you prefer to think about it. You can use this through a whole host of different genres, as well as for things like sound design as well. All right, so here is Insidious from Impact Soundworks. Let's go ahead and go over the how of this interface, of this instrument. And by how, I mean how does it work? So the easiest way, in my opinion, to learn this instrument, it looks a little bit complicated, but it's actually not that hard. I want you to know a couple things. First up, make sure you use the snapshots, what they're called here in REAKTOR, or the presets, as normal people would call them. There's probably a preset that already sounds close to what you want, if not exactly what you want. And of course, you can always modify it from there. And second, make sure you turn on this little eye here in REAKTOR. This is going to show you information hints. So make sure that is turned on, and then you can just hover over any parameter and you'll see exactly what it does. So up across the top here, let me close down this browser. We don't need it. Across the top, you can see we have 2 different kinds of chips. They're going to sound slightly different, especially once you combined wave shapes. So just choose whichever one you prefer. We have this little stripe here. You can actually right click that and view, say, like the bend range, and view snapshots for these different banks, as you can see right here. Let's close down that browser again. Put this back to view A. We have our filter here, so you can turn that on and you'll see the filter over here now. That's not turned on. Same thing for your other oscillators down here. If your filter is turned on, it will send it over here to this filter. If it's not, it won't be sent over there, all right? Then we have this MIDI in here, and you can choose between 1, 2, 3, whatever MIDI channel you want for each of your different oscillators here, which means you can have different MIDI patterns triggering each of your different oscillators. So completely different patterns, all within one instance of Insidious here. So for example, right now, all 3 of these, let's just turn on the second oscillator for now. Both of these have the MIDI in of 1. So if I play back a track here, we're getting the same exact MIDI pattern triggering each of these different oscillators. But if I want this MIDI down here, which is like a bass line, to trigger my second oscillator, all I need to do is switch this over to 2, and then create your MIDI track in your DAW. Make sure it's set to REAKTOR so it's triggering the proper instrument, and change that to, in this case, channel 2, could be channel 3, whatever you happen to want. And then we're going to have this. That's just channel 2 there. So that's pretty cool that you can actually have up to 3, different patterns triggering, all within this one instance of Insidious. Then we have clock speed. So for the most authentic sound, if you will, you would set this to either 50 or 60. And we can see in here over on the modulation panel, let me just take this loop end up. Just going to draw in some sequence here. So if I turn this on to 50, you can see my speed can go up to 50 hertz. If I turn it to 60, it can go up to 60 hertz, so on and so forth. So if you want something really quick, really fast, you can Set that clock to whatever you want there. Then we have our wheel control for our mod wheel. It's on off right now. We can do the pulse width modulation center. Just moving the mod wheel, I can make that the LFO. As you can see, the depth right here. Turn up the frequency first. Being controlled by the mod wheel, or you can set it to the pitch. You can see that depth right there. That's your wheel control. Then we have solo, legato, and ARP. Again, as long as that eye is turned on, you can just hover over these and see exactly what they do. Here on solo, go to legato. Just holding down one note and pressing some other ones. And as you can see in the pop-up there, legato for our overlapping notes. Jump to the new note without re-triggering anything. You can read what everything else does there. We have this porta, which is portamento. You can almost think of it like a glide here. You can hear how it sort of glides up there. Same thing here on legato. Just choose your speed that you want. And over here on live ARP or live arpeggio, we can choose our arpeggio speed. On this side, over to the left, we can actually choose time divisions, or we can choose basically hertz over here on this side. So turn this up to say 45 hertz. Hold down say a chord. Make it faster. Hold down multiple notes, of course. Or use our time divisions. You can have a quick arpeggio set up that way. All right, cool. So then we have our 4 different wavetables or waveform sound sources. Our sawtooth. You can combine these, by the way. A triangle. All sound different, of course, and noise. You could do a test bit. I'm not going to go into that. You can read what it does right there. Ring modulation, as long as we have our triangle on. And of course, sync right there as well to hard sync with the previous channel. This is our key tracking, or our pitch tracking. So if I play a C down here and a C up here, of course, tracks that pitch. If I do it to half, you can see it only responds to the pitch modulation only. So on half here, just click the button. I'm pressing 2 different octaves away on C, but it's not responding. So if I turn up my pitch here, though, then we get some pitch change. If I turn it off completely, I can press a very low C, very high C. We're getting the same, the same sound. So you might want to use that for drums or something like that you don't want, drum sort of sounds that you don't necessarily want pitched. All right. Then we have tune, pretty self-explanatory. Tune the whole thing up or down. Then you have your width for the pulse width. Take it down. That's way low there. Or up. Whatever you prefer. Then we have our pulse width modulation and our pitch. We have LFOs and envelopes for both of these here. Turn up the depth. We've already sort of heard this a bit. Frequency. Change the center there. Fade that in. So it starts with a straight note and then starts modulating. Then you have your key sync and you can read what that does. So it restarts the LFO. On each note, if you want that, we can use these arrows here to change our shapes. So plenty of room for customization there. And of course, your envelope, I'm assuming you sort of know what an envelope is. Our attack, delay, sustain, and release. You're going to see a few envelopes throughout this interface here. Over here to pitch, same sort of stuff. Switch through. Fade that in. Then your envelope. And down here you have your octave for your transpose, your note transpose, and fine transpose. So that's pretty self-explanatory. Octave. This is by note. By note, or by some people might call that step. And here's fine control of that, so you get just the pitch that you want. Of course, all of these controls are duplicated over our other oscillators as well. Then another envelope down here, our volume envelope. So I changed my attack way up. Now, as you can see, is represented down here. It's going to slide in now. Then up here is how long does it decay down to our sustain level. You can see that represented right here on this graph. So if it decays really quickly down to this level, hold the key, slides up and then it slides down, versus a really quick attack where it just comes on and then slides down. Or make the sustain level higher, the longer decay, however you prefer to set this up. Then the release is how quickly does that sound essentially fade out after you release your key. So is it going to fade out there, or is it just going to go off? Just goes off whenever I release the key. On, off. Or release longer. Release the key and it fades out. All right, so that's your basics of your ADSR there. Volume, pretty self-explanatory, right? Down or up. Then we have this sound effects button. This is pretty cool. This is, you can sort of think of this as like a randomized control for a bunch of different parameters. So click that and you can see all of this stuff got randomized. Click it again. Get all kinds of crazy sounds out of that. Let me switch this back over. Here. All right. Of course, as I mentioned, turn on your other oscillators here. Switch things up however you want. But we also have another page right here. Just click this to toggle to the modulation panel and table. Down here we can set our speed, as we already saw once we look at the whenever we looked at the clock speed. You can change your loop start and loop end right here, as you can see them across these steps here. So make it sort of short here and enable whatever waveforms you want, whatever, you want your ring modulation, your sync, you want to tune things up or down. See how it steps through. Let me speed this up a bit. Let's get these here. Then take this one, maybe tune that up, tune this down, tune this up. You can do all kind of stuff here over in your modulation table. Again, pretty easy to use. You can also click and hold, by the way, and just drag if you want to turn those on. Combine them if you want to. Turn on ring for these here. Make sure we have our triangle on there. Set your loop end way down here. Change your speed, so on and so forth. Get all kinds of cool chiptune sounds, vintage video game sounds here in your modulation table. Then over here, we have another filter. You can sort of think of this as like the master filter. Let's switch this back to a simple square. So this filter is going to affect anything that we send to it. So if I have these channels on too, send these all to the filter. You can change the MIDI in just as we did previously. Change the curve for that filter if you want. You can change the chip type for that filter. We have our LFO and our envelope controls, our key sync, all this stuff that we already went over. Change that depth. Some cool sounds in here. Cool wobble sounds. High pass, low pass, band pass is what those buttons mean. Down here you have mono or poly. Again, as long as you have your eye checked, you can just read exactly what that does there. Switch out the poly. Then you have your gear icons. You can enable MIDI velocity if you want to, enable the scopes or turn them off, remove your circuit noise, and global overall tuning right there. Double click, put 0 back in there. All right, so that is basically the how of how this works. Not that difficult, a few concepts that you need to understand. If you don't understand synthesis, I highly recommend you actually open up the manual for Insidious. go down to the very bottom of the manual, and you're going to find a bunch of links to sort of the basics of synthesis that can help you understand some of this stuff a little bit more if you don't understand some of the terms that I'm using here. Step through a couple of these presets here. Here's some loop sounds. You see here in these tables what's going on there. Getting classic sound there. All right, so that should show you how to actually use Insidious from Impact Soundworks. Again, if you pick it up, make sure you go through these snapshots, because you're probably going to find something in here that's already pretty close to exactly what you want. And if you need help understanding that's what all this stuff does, just pop on your tooltips and you can figure it out in no time.